300 years ago, off the coast of Florida, 11 Spanish ships vanished in a hurricane, and with them the fortune of an empire. Now its treasure is being salvaged from the sea. 1,200 years ago, King Ashot the Great united the Kingdom of Georgia and was assassinated later by rebels. Lost for centuries, his royal tomb has now been found and identified in northeastern Turkey. In Mexico, the writing of the great city of Teotihuacan has never been deciphered, but now two scholars think they've cracked it. A potential Rosetta Stone moment for one of the greatest ancient cities on Earth. And just in time for Halloween, a homeowner in New Orleans has found an authentic ancient Roman tombstone in their yard. Where is it from, and how did it get there? These are just 4 of the many archaeological discoveries that were made in October 2025 that are rewriting what we know about the past. Today, I will guide you on a journey through time exploring these latest exciting stories from around the world, including an exciting interview with the linguist and archaeologist who think they may have figured out how to decipher the writing of Teotihuacan. I have used my years of experience as an archaeologist to carefully research and put together this video of well-sourced and interesting news about real archaeology. No pseudoscience, clickbait, or AI here. Which is why I also sometimes butcher pronunciations, despite my best efforts to get them right. If this all sounds like it's right up your trench, then stay tuned to dig deep into these captivating stories from our past. This video is sponsored by AncientCyprus.com. Cyprus, inhabited over 12,000 years ago in the pre-ceramic Neolithic period, boasts a long and complex archaeological history. AncientCyprus.com is dedicated to fostering interest in Cypriot and Levantine archaeology and supporting archaeology communication. Their work encompasses a diverse array of projects, from developing articles on topics like early Bronze Age pottery to producing 2 billion pixel surface scans of ancient objects and creating extremely high-res 3D models of archaeological ceramics that allow for detailed inspection of surface damage. The organization's goal is to document the entirety of Cypriot and broader Levantine archaeology and material culture. In sponsoring this video, all they want you to do is check out their website, which is linked in the description of this video, so head there after this to learn more about ancient Cyprus. All right, everybody, let's dig in to the discoveries. We have 9 stories today in our Top Discoveries segment, presented in chronological order, starting with the one that goes the farthest back in time. Our journey today begins 12,000 years ago in southeastern Turkey. This area is famous for the Tas Tepeler, aka the Stone Hills, a group of archaeological sites that date to the pre-pottery Neolithic period, during the transition of humans from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farming communities. The most famous site in this group is Göbekli Tepe. You might have heard of it, but our focus today is 35 kilometers away on its sister site of Karahan Tepe. Excavations here have found more than 250 T-shaped pillars, enclosed communal structures, and intricately carved sculptures depicting humans and animals. It also has a more advanced architectural layout than Göbekli Tepe, with evidence of early forms of settlement and social organization. Now, recent work has added another groundbreaking discovery: a T-shaped pillar carved with a human face. The face has deep eye sockets, a broad nose, and sharply defined facial lines, and stylistically, it matches other human statues that have been found at the site. We have known for a long time that the T-shaped pillars of these sites symbolized human figures. However, this is the first time that a pillar directly portrays a human face, transforming abstract symbolism into direct representation. It's been described as a major leap in understanding the emergence of self-awareness and identity in the prehistoric mind. It could even be one of the earliest known depictions of humanity. Ongoing work at Karahantepe is quickly establishing this site as a new epicenter for discovery, and I'm sure it's not the last time we will be seeing it on this show. Next, we head to the ancient site of Nineveh in Iraq and jump forward around 11,000 years to the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. Situated on the banks of the Tigris River near modern-day Mosul, Nineveh was the capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire and once the largest city in the world. Until recently, its remains have been inaccessible to archaeologists due to modern religious structures. But now, collaboration and careful planning have finally allowed for systemic excavations, which have led to the discovery of carved throne room reliefs and 15 colossal winged bull statues known as Lamassu, which, side note, is one of my favorite ancient words to say. Lamassu! It's just, I don't know, there's just something really cute about it. Dating to the reigns of the three greatest kings of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal, these finds come from the height of the empire's dominance. Lamassu statues are perhaps one of the most well-known symbols of this civilization. Carved from massive stone blocks, they combine the body of a bull, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a man. Assyrians believed that they were protective spirits that guarded the thresholds between the human and divine realms. Positioned at palace gates, they warded off chaos and ensured the stability of the empire, symbolizing strength, swiftness, and intelligence, the divine attributes of kingship. Of the 15 new Lamassu statues, 12 of them remain in their original positions. And what makes them significant, in addition to the fact that there's such a large number of them that's been found, is their diversity of construction. Some were sculpted from a single block of stone, while others were assembled from multiple pieces, an unusual practice at this time, which suggests either an evolution of artistic techniques or a shift in building traditions. We don't exactly know why. And the discovery doesn't even stop there. In a nearby military complex linked to a royal residence, fragments of throne room reliefs were also found that show royal processions, military campaigns, and ritual scenes. These new fragments could help fill crucial gaps in our understanding of late Assyrian artistic development, especially under Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. These discoveries are not just archaeological milestones. They are acts of cultural recovery in a region that has suffered from immense heritage loss in recent decades due to rampant destruction and looting during modern conflicts. As the excavation continues, it's hoped that more of the palace complex will be found, potentially revealing inscriptions or archives that could offer us even more insights into the administration, religion, and art of the Assyrian Empire. Our next feature is an unusual one in that it concerns a 1900-year-old Roman grave marker, but it's been found in New Orleans, USA. The artifact was found while a couple were clearing away undergrowth in their yard, and obviously begs the question of how did it get there? Did the Romans cross the Atlantic? Was it aliens? This unusual discovery set the couple on a quest for answers. They noticed that there was a Latin inscription and sent photos to two different Latin experts at different universities. Both of them separately determined that the headstone was dedicated to a 2nd century CE Roman sailor and military man. It reads, "To the spirits of the dead for Sextus Congenius Verus, soldier of the Praetorian fleet Misenninus, from the tribe of the Bessi, who lived 42 years and served 22 in the military on the trireme Asclepius. Attilius Carus and Vettius Longinus, his heirs, made this for him well deserving." The experts also determined that the stone fit the description of one reported missing from the City Museum of Civitavecchia, Italy, near where it had been originally found. From there, the Civitavecchia Museum was contacted and the stone was turned over to the FBI. It appears that the tombstone was likely brought to New Orleans sometime in the 20th century, perhaps after the Second World War, which saw the U.S. military fighting in Italy. Yet it is not immediately clear who might have done it. The family of the locals who previously owned the home for most of the 1900s were unlikely candidates, having not served in Italy during World War II. Regardless of how it ended up in the U.S., the Civitavecchia Museum are looking forward to getting the stone back so that it can be displayed once more. Now we head east to South Korea and the city of Gyeongju. which was once the ancient capital of the Shilla kingdom, where the remains of a wooden chamber tomb dating to the 4th or 5th century CE have been found. Inside are the remains of a military commander, alongside his full set of armor, horse gear, and fragments of a gilt bronze crown. The commander was in his 30s when he died and was buried with another individual who has been identified as a retainer sacrifice, a burial custom from Shilla's formative years. This is only the second time sets of armor for both the man and his horse from this era have been found, providing tangible evidence to back up historical records of the kingdom's heavily armored cavalry. The sword, armor, and helmet were preserved in exceptional condition, and parts of the armor were made from leather, differing from the iron-dominated designs found previously. This suggests they were trying to make armor lighter and more mobile in response to evolving military tactics. However, the most exciting artifact from this tomb is the fragments of the gilt bronze crown, believed to be among the oldest of its kind from this period. Its decorative motifs resemble those of the neighboring contemporary kingdom of Goguryeo? Okay, I'm going to look this one up. Goguryeo. There we go. This suggests active cultural exchange between the two powerful kingdoms. This discovery of a complete set of man and horse armor is incredibly rare, allowing us to expand our understanding of the political and military structures of Shilla and its relationships with the wider world. Our next find brings us back to Turkey and its northeastern mountains of Artvin province, where beneath the crumbling remains of the Petrus and Paulus church, researchers have uncovered the long-lost tomb of the Georgian king Ashot the Great from the 9th century CE. He ruled during a defining era for the medieval Caucasus region, uniting the Georgian principalities under the Bagratid dynasty, rebuilding Christian monasteries, and restoring political stability after centuries of invasions. Historical texts record that he was assassinated in 826 and buried beneath the church in Ardanush, a clue that has now guided modern archaeologists to his final resting place. When the team began work this year around the apse of the church, they found a 2-meter-long and 1.8-meter wide vaulted tomb chamber that had been sealed since the Middle Ages. Despite the fact that it was empty, its architecture and the exact position matched the centuries-old Georgian descriptions of Ashot's burial site. Excavations at the wider site have uncovered a thriving medieval settlement. Artifacts from the dig are due to be displayed at the Artvin Museum, and plans are underway to preserve the tomb chamber and open the site to visitors. This discovery fills a major gap in Georgian medieval history, as for generations, only 2 royal tombs were unaccounted for, those of Queen Tamar and King Ashot. Now one mystery has finally been solved. Our next feature this month brings us to the site of Teotihuacan in Mexico. Known for its monumental pyramids, complex residential compounds, the Avenue of the Dead, and vibrant murals, this site reached its height 1,000 years ago and was once the largest city in the Americas. The name we know it by was given to it centuries after its fall by the Aztecs, and roughly means where the sun came into being. Both the city of Teotihuacan and its associated civilization are referred to by this name. We actually don't even know what they called themselves. Its influence throughout Mesoamerica is well documented, and even on this show, I have previously featured discoveries that highlight its relationship with the nearby Maya. Yet, despite its connections with the literate Maya, the primary language and writing of the Teotihuanicos remains unknown. Whereas the decipherment of other Mesoamerican writing systems has provided us with a wealth of information about their authors, we have not been able to access the same information about Teotihuacan society from their own written sources. But now, linguist Magnus Faro Hansen and archaeologist Christoph Helmke think they have cracked it. In their new paper, they propose that Teotihuacan's writing system encodes an early Uto-Aztecan language. I caught up with them earlier this month to learn more about this exciting discovery and how they came upon it. Let's dig in to what they had to say. Welcome to the channel, both of you. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm going to jump right into my first question, which is, can you give us a brief as you can, background about the site of Teotihuacan and its writing and language?
Teotihuacan is one of the main civilizations of Mesoamerica, and it's usually framed around the capital of the civilization, which is the city itself, Teotihuacan. But one of the things that we usually forget is that there are multiple sites that are connected with the civilization and has a very distinctive architecture, funerary practices. And one of the things that we're focusing on is the writing system. And the thing that's interesting for us is that until now, there hasn't been a real phonetic decipherment of Teotihuacan writing, unlike Maya and Aztec writing, which have been deciphered.
Mm-hmm. I actually did a paper on Teotihuacan way back in my undergraduate degree, and I remember reading about how it's very mysterious because it's one of the few sites that it's absolutely huge and everyone knows about it, but we actually haven't been able to decipher its language. So that's really, really cool that you guys have potentially come up to a solution about this. What exactly prompted you to start your project on this particular subject?
So I'm a specialist in the linguistic history of certain languages of Mesoamerica and Western Mexico. And Christophe is a specialist in the writing and the archaeology. We started out doing a project where I was a postdoc and Christophe was my advisor, supervisor, where we were planning to look at how well Yucatecan languages that were prior to the Nahuatl language, which is what I mostly specialize in, would fit as a potential candidate language for Teotihuacan writing. And our plan was to look mostly at how the sequences of glyphs matched the potential sequences of what would be expected from words and morphemes, like word parts, in this Yucatecan language that I was working to reconstruct. The project there was basically just to see whether it might even make sense to think of this language as a candidate language, because it had been mentioned many times as a possible candidate, and also rejected many times as a possible candidate, because some scholars found it makes sense for this language to have been spoken in this area because we know that it was spoken there historically, and others would say it doesn't make sense for this area, this language to be spoken in this language at this time because the Nahuatl people came later into this area than what we consider to be the time when Teotihuacan writing was produced. To our surprise, we came up with some evidence that suggested that it was a good candidate language.
And so then can you kind of expand a bit on exactly what the hypothesis is that you found this support for?
The hypothesis that other scholars have already sort of aired or suggested around 2000, when the first studies really showed that Teotihuacan had an actual writing system. Now it was mentioned as a candidate language, and people were trying to sort of suggest potential readings in Nahuatl. The problem with that is that Nahuatl, as we know it and as it has been applied, is a fairly late language that we know only from around the 16th century, which is, of course, more than 1,000 years after the Teotihuacan texts were produced. So it was sort of suggested that this would be a good candidate because we know that Nahuatl people in the early colonial and late post-classic period were living in that area. And that they had been living there for at least a couple of hundred years, if not more. So that is the hypothesis basically that we decided to test. But to test that well, we had to find the stage of the language that would have been spoken a little bit more than 1,000 years before Nahuatl was first documented in the 16th century. So that required us to sort of roll back the sound changes and the grammatical changes that a language undergoes over a millennium, compare Nahuatl, the Nahuatl varieties that exist with each other to find out like what is the earliest form of Nahuatl, and then compare this form of Nahuatl with other languages of the same family to find out what would it have been like even before it turned into this earliest form of Nahuatl. And that is what we were trying to test then. How well does this language, as we have figured out it would have been spoken, how does that fit with the writing system?
The writing system is something that I've been working on for the better part of 20 years now. And I've been working in collaboration with a series of colleagues, especially here in Europe and also some in North America and Mexico. And the task that we had, especially from around 2000, after the seminal publication that Magnus mentioned, the task was then to start looking at the writing system in epigraphic terms. So which signs are used to convey names, which sign combinations are used to refer to dates, to titles, to place names, to deity names, and things like that. Because of the way the writing is structured, it's very figurative. Some would say pictographic. So there is a fair degree of transparency as to what the signs represent. It does require, the imagery and the kind of recourse that they're making to graphic conventions for representing different signs. But with the background on that, you can start working out essentially basic parts of speech. The question then was matching it up with language. And without a good language candidate, you have these essentially what are called semantic decipherments. So we have a basic grasp on parts of speech, on syntax, and what these signs are trying to convey. But without a language to test or to try against, there's no way of actually resolving that or reading it phonetically. And that was the major impasse. And so there are colleagues that have tried to do readings with Nahuatl, the Aztec language. But the problem, again, is there's a temporal dissonance there, as Magnus mentioned already, because there's more than 1,000 years between the text that we have at Teotihuacan and the Nahuatl language as recorded shortly after the Spanish conquest. Think about Shakespeare's English, and then 1,000 years before, we're essentially looking at the earliest version of Beowulf. So it'd be tempting to read Beowulf with Shakespeare in English, and that's just not going to work.
So the semantic decipherment that Christoph mentions is basically like if you see a picture of a flower, you can say, oh, this is a flower. They probably use their word for flower to read the sign. But since many of the writing systems in Mesoamerica use the rebus principle to write words using a sign that looks like one thing, but writing a word that sounds like the same thing, we need to know the sound to be able to read those phonetic applications of the same sound. And that requires us to identify the language.
Yeah, is the correct term not logogram? Is that what
Yes.
you're talking about? Yeah, I very briefly did Babylonian cuneiform during my undergraduate, and logogram is a word that will haunt me forever from that.
It's a very useful word because it also describes the way that our own numbers work. For example, numbers are logograms in our writing system, right? That's why we can write the word for to do something for someone with the number 4.
Some things are fairly easy to represent, and other things are more difficult to represent, more conceptual. And so their recourse is usually made to representing something that sounds like something else, and then thereby cueing that. And then that's where the rebus principle is very interesting, because that can usually only be resolved in one language.
We've talked a bit about the Teotihuacan writing and how it's only been in the past 20 years that we even really realized they had writing, and now we're only just starting to be able to begin to decipher it. Can either of you comment on why exactly it's taken us so long to kind of come to that conclusion, and the history of looking into their writing per se?
Already in the 1980s, there were a lot of efforts made to create a sign catalog of the signs. But the people that were working with that met with a lot of frustration, essentially, in their work, and then in the end started thinking that maybe Teotihuacan writing wasn't actually writing at all, and then started calling it a notational system and by other more loose terms. But already in the 1930s, the first Mexican scholars to look at it, especially Alfonso Caso, they had no doubt that it was writing system. And I think part of the reason why there's been reticence in terms of recognizing it outright as a writing system is because of the format of the writing system itself. Teotihuacan writing is a little bit different than other Mesoamerican writing systems, in the sense that they tend to write in terms of what's usually described as emblematically. So even when glyphs appear on murals, they're usually presented in a very large format that's a bit larger than you would expect. It almost dominates a whole scene. There's also a lot of artistic or calligraphic decorative use of writing, where they might write a toponym, but instead of writing it once, they might write it repeatedly, and then it becomes almost a decorative pattern. And so there, the line gets very quickly blurred between what's writing and kind of the aesthetic qualities of writing and decorative uses of it. And then finally, there are very, very few texts at Teotihuacan. So one of the things that's been the major challenge that we have, that we faced, and that we continue to face, is that it's a very small corpus of texts, fewer than 300 texts in all. And when we say texts, we're referring to very, very short glyphic captions, essentially. Sometimes the text can just be a single date. A monument with a date on it. Long linear text is one of the things that is an extreme rarity in Teotihuacan. They do exist, but that's not the major use of writing at Teotihuacan.
You've kind of traced the language back, traced the roots to try and develop something to help you decipher it. And you've applied it to some of these texts that you've mentioned. So what is some of the stuff that you think you've been able to translate?
When we were starting to work on this, I had all these reconstructions of words in Yucatecan languages fresh in my mind. And Christoph came to me with a book, and he showed me some of the murals. And one of the images that stood out to me was a face with its ears visible, and very, very huge earrings that were resembling opuntia cactuses. And the first thing I thought, well, that's a weird thing. That's not something you would wear as an earring, and it's a huge earring. It doesn't really look realistic. And then I realized that in this language that I was reconstructing, the word for ear is naka, and the word for nopal cactus is also naka. Basically, the root is like that. There's a suffix on either of those that makes it a little bit different, but it's nakasa and nakari. So naka would be sort of the shared component of those two. And that's funny. Why would they put those two things that sound the same right next to each other? And then I couldn't sleep that night, and I realized, okay, what if it's the name? And then I thought that face had been identified by other scholars as a deity face, as the face of a goddess. But I realized that in the Wirrárica language, their main goddess, which is like an earth deity, her name is Nakawe. And then I thought, okay, could they actually be writing this name here? And that's when I sort of went to Christoph and said, I think this, what do you think about this? And he said, okay, let's look into this some more. Then he would send me images, and he'd say, okay, this is a sign that represents this. Do you think this could, what would you think that this would be pronounced like in this language? Or I would say, okay, I found this image. It looks like this. Would it make sense if this could be writing this? And a lot of the times it actually worked out.
The reason why that particular reading was very suggestive to me, and I thought it was so important, was because in the previous analyses that had been done of these glyphs, we knew that glyph must fulfill the role of spelling somebody's name or recording somebody's name. And then when Mauna suggested, well, this looks to be recording a name, that matched precisely the parts of speech that we were looking for. So it fulfilled the semantic criteria that we'd already established from the outset. And the other thing is the practice of using two logograms or word signs that sound essentially the same or very closely to one another is actually a practice that we know from Aztec writing later on. And originally this was something that was considered to be fairly unique for Aztec writing. And then finding that at Teotihuacan shows that there's more of a direct script continuity in central Mexico that couldn't be traced all the way back to Teotihuacan. And that this practice is probably something that was developed in Teotihuacan and thereby inherited by the Aztec later on, rather than being a particularism of their writing.
So over a year or so, we had a bit more than 10 examples of glyphs that actually we thought at least that if we applied a specific phonetic value, it would make sense in a different context. And that's sort of what we were looking for, to have this reading that wasn't just applying a word to the glyph, but applying it so that it makes sense in another context than its original meaning. We ended up with a bit more than that, like 15 or 18 readings, depending on how we count them, which is actually not a terrible percentage of the glyphs that we have registered.
There's about 115 signs in all, and 300 texts. So yeah, with 15 to 18 what we're calling motivated readings, we're at slightly over 10% in terms of the reading of the or decipherments of the different glyphs, and we have several additional readings for signs that are purely logographic from what we can see. So they represent the words quite literally for what they represent.
And those readings are the ones that are sort of hypotheses to be checked in the future, right? Because we do hope, of course, that in the near future, lots of more texts will come out of Teotihuacan, and the ongoing excavations and finding more murals, finding more ceramics.
You've published a paper on this already. So what is the next steps in this project for you guys? Are you going to be doing more with it, or have you had any pushback from people?
The paper that we've published now, that's sort of the introduction, because we had to introduce the idea of the way that we're working, the idea of this language being something that we can reconstruct, because that's not something everyone would agree on. On the linguistic side, it's been a little bit controversial, because it's been this idea that no, Nahuas are not they're late comers to central Mexico. At the time of Teotihuacan, their ancestors would have been way up in the north, right? So we had to introduce this idea that no, actually it makes sense historically and in terms of the time sequence that they could be there. So we had to put all these different base arguments in there, and that meant that we didn't get a space to represent all of our readings. And actually, I think we've saved the best reading for our next paper.
The other thing is to continue expanding the corpus. So even though there is a rough count of about 300, most of the texts are actually found on ceramics. About 60% of Teotihuacan texts are on portable objects, on ceramics, either in censers or on drinking vases. And that corpus is not particularly well documented. So one of the ambitions that we have is to start looking more and more at ceramic texts and seeing which sign combinations we have there, and also revisiting some of the murals that haven't been all that well documented or drawn in detail. And also we're planning on organizing workshops, and we'd like to organize one in Mexico this coming year, to invite several colleagues that work with Teotihuacan writing systems and other related writing systems, and to essentially get their feedback and to put more heads together on this, because we know that this is something that's been very productive for the decipherment of Maya writing.
And you asked about pushback. So the article comes with comments from 10 scholars, and it seems almost like about half are happy, and the other half are not completely convinced, and some are very unconvinced. But the interesting thing from our point of view is that it's sometimes the things that they're not convinced by are sort of pointing in opposite directions. So one of them is saying this is not new, and the other one is saying this is not this is too new, this is too weird, we need much stronger evidence for that. And the guy says, no, this is not really new. We've been saying this for a long while. No, so in a way that suggests to me that the pushback it's coming from two sides that will eventually converge, and think hopefully with workshops showing them the way that we have been thinking and working, they can help us improve some of the parts that are less convincing, maybe weed out some parts that might turn out to be wrong. And then I think that eventually, hopefully, they can also come and see the parts that are convincing and that can be built further on. Because I don't think that we have any idea that we're going to be able to sort of like solve the entire thing ourselves. It's something that will have to be collaborative, and where we hopefully gradually can convince more and more of our colleagues to work along this line. And that also includes testing other languages, because that's one of the objections that we've encountered. Oh, but you haven't tested this language. And I said, no, we can't do that all in a single paper, or maybe not even in a single lifetime, because it's a huge amount of work to reconstruct the language to the correct time period, and then do the work of testing it. So if someone else wants to do that, we're very happy to collaborate with them. Also, if that means that they find a better way of reading the glyphs, because that has to be the goal, right? To find the best readings, regardless of which language and who ends up providing the final piece of the puzzle.
I can't wait to see what their next reading is going to be that they teased, and keep track of how their testing of this hypothesis progresses, and hopefully has some really tangible dividends for being able to read this language. Our next find brings us to Stockholm in Sweden, where someone digging for earthworms at their summer cabin has found a vast hoard of 12th century silver coins and jewelry. Weighing almost 6 kilos, the hoard contains up to 20,000 silver coins, silver rings, pendants, beads, and other artifacts, all buried together in a now degraded copper cauldron. Preliminary analysis of the coins has shown that many bear the inscription Knutus, linking them to King Knut Eriksson, who ruled Sweden from 1173 to 1195. Notably, after a long hiatus of domestic coin production, he re-established a coinage system and revived minting, issuing coins marked Knutus or Knutus Rex. There are also several bishop coins in the hoard, which were minted under episcopal authority. They feature a bishop holding a crozier in his hand. Such coins are rare and reflect not only the close relationship between church and state, but also the financial autonomy of bishops as local authorities. Interestingly, the discovery predates the traditional founding of Stockholm in 1252, showing that significant activity, wealth, and settlement must have existed in the region long before the city became formalized. Archaeologists are now looking for traces of any nearby human activity that might explain who might have buried the hoard and under what circumstances. The National Heritage Board of Sweden has custody of the treasure and will decide whether to compensate its discoverer in order to keep it in the public domain, where it could end up at a national museum, or if it will be sold privately. This discovery ranks among the largest medieval silver hoards ever unearthed in Sweden, not only in weight, but also in volume and numismatic rarity. The mix of royal and ecclesiastical coinage makes it especially valuable for understanding economic, political, and religious networks of this time. Now we head to Spain, where researchers investigating the preserved historic nests of a bearded vulture in a cliff cave have found a 750-year-old grass shoe. Further investigation of neighboring roosts revealed that generations of vultures had basically been archaeologists by feathering their nests with other historical artifacts, including pieces of leather, cloth, and string. This species of vulture reuses cliffside nests over generations, creating homes made up of layers of bones, grass, twigs, and scavenged materials. And I just want to specify that these nests that were excavated are no longer in use, as the bird went extinct in this region where they were looked at over 70 to 130 years ago. The vast majority of materials in the nests were bones, but roughly 9% was human-made, including a crossbow bolt, 72 pieces of leather, 129 pieces of cloth, and 25 items made from esparto grass, including the shoe, known as an agobia. This type of shoe typically lasted for a few days of wear and were continuously repaired and replaced by hand by the wearer. This type of grass has been used for thousands of years to make shoes, including modern-day espadrilles, which were originally a popular form of peasant footwear in Spain. Radiocarbon dating revealed the age of the shoe and suggests that the vultures were stealing them from medieval peasants 750 years ago, rather than taking them away from a modern archaeological site where they'd been uncovered. Can you just imagine being a medieval peasant, having perhaps taken off your shoes after a long day working in a field, when a giant vulture swoops down to steal it? That's quite a picture. This discovery has revealed that these nests can be a treasure trove of archaeological information as their location in Iberian caves and rock shelters with stable temperatures and low humidity are ideal environments for preserving organic remains. Researchers plan to continue working on the nests, and who knows, maybe they'll find the other half of the pair of shoes. Our last story this month is another treasure, but this time it comes from under the sea off the east coast of Florida, where divers have recovered over 1,000 Spanish coins from the wreckage of the legendary 1715 treasure fleet. Also known as the Plate Fleet, this convoy of 12 ships set sail from Havana bound for Spain on July 24th, 1715, laden with treasures from Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia, including silver bars, gold coins, and royal jewels. However, within a week, a powerful hurricane struck, sinking 11 of the ships across a 50-mile stretch of ocean. Historians estimate that as much as $400 million in treasure was lost, including the jewels of the Spanish Queen Elizabeth Farnese, making it one of the greatest maritime tragedies in colonial history. Some of the wreckage was salvaged in the immediate aftermath, but vast portions of the treasure remained buried beneath sand and sea for centuries. But before you go grabbing your diving gear and a plane ticket to Florida, salvage operations on this wreck are strictly regulated, and unauthorized removal of artifacts is illegal. Only 1715 Fleet Queen's Jewels LLC and its subcontractors are permitted to explore and recover items from the wrecks, operating under state archaeological oversight. This latest discovery was made during their summer 2025 salvage season. More than 1,000 silver reals and 5 gold escudos were lifted from the seabed. Many coins still bear legible mint marks and dates, offering valuable information about Spanish colonial mints in Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia. The condition of these coins suggests they were part of a single chest or shipment that spilled when the ship broke apart. Concentrated recoveries like this are rare, given the centuries of ocean currents and storms that typically scatter artifacts like this. The recovered coins are undergoing careful conservation before they will be displayed to the public. Plans are in place for local museums on Florida's Treasure Coast to exhibit select pieces, offering both residents and visitors a direct encounter with the maritime history that has shaped the region. That's it for our top discoveries. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this segment, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Now we're going to move on to current news and events. I'm sure you probably heard all about our first story, the blatant theft of French imperial crown jewels worth more than $100 million from the Louvre Museum. On a Sunday last month, just after the museum opened in the morning, 4 thieves arrived with a stolen vehicle-mounted mechanical lift that they used to gain access to the Gallery of Apollo via a balcony. Once inside, they threatened security, who evacuated the premises and used a disc cutter to crack open display cases housing the jewelry, getting in and out in 4 minutes and using scooters to escape. The audacious heist, carried out in broad daylight, has prompted a reckoning in France, as well as criticisms of the Louvre's security measures. The gallery's localized alarm had recently broken or possibly been deactivated, although the museum's wider alarms did sound, and staff followed protocol by contacting security forces and protecting visitors. The stolen gems include an emerald and diamond necklace that Napoleon I gave to his second wife, Marie-Louise, a diadem set with 212 pearls and nearly 2,000 diamonds that once belonged to Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III, a tiara, necklace, and earrings from the sapphire set of Queen Marie Amélie and Queen Hortense, and a diamond-encrusted large bodice bow of Empress Eugenie. Luckily, the thieves dropped the most precious of the jewels, Empress Eugenie's crown, made of gold, emerald, and diamonds, during their escape, and left behind tools and other items at the scene of the crime that potentially bore traces of their DNA. They tried to set fire to their vehicle outside, but were prevented by the intervention of a museum staff member. 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, have since been found and charged, and are described as local people from Seine Saint-Denis, a département north of Paris that is one of the poorest in France. All three of the men charged were known to police from previous convictions, including theft. The case is ongoing, and at least one other perpetrator remains at large, as well as the jewels themselves. I've got my fingers crossed that the pieces are recovered, but I'm not going to lie, I'm not overly hopeful. Our next story is a public appeal by the British Museum to raise £3.5 million by April 2026 in order to secure the Tudor Heart pendant for their collection. It was found in December 2019 by a metal detectorist in Warwickshire and has been dated to the reign of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. The heart-shaped pendant is decorated with enameled motifs that attached to a 75-link gold chain via a suspension clasp in the form of a hand emerging from a cloud. Every element has been made using the purest gold. The pendant front bears a white and red Tudor rose entwined with a pomegranate bush, the personal emblem of Queen Catherine. The hidden face is decorated with the initials H and K, united by a tasseled cord. Both sides carry a French motto, toujours, meaning always. Very, very ironic. It's thought the piece may have been made to celebrate the betrothal of their 2-year-old daughter, Princess Mary, to the heir of France in 1518. The pendant is one of the finest and most important post-medieval finds ever found, as surviving examples of early Tudor jewelry in public collections is quite rare. It was probably not made as a gift from Henry to Catherine or vice versa, but probably instead for someone of high standing, as laws from the early 16th century indicate that a piece of this weight and purity would not have been suitable to be worn by anyone of lesser rank than the son of a baron. After it was found, the pendant was reported under the Treasure Act, which gives museums and galleries in England a chance to acquire historical objects and put them on display before they are then put on auction with the proceeds split between the finder and landowner. A public campaign is now open for donations to attempt to acquire the piece for the public collection of the British Museum. You can find a link to it in the description of this video if you'd like to contribute. And the heart itself will go on display in room 2 at the museum's gallery until April 2026 if you want a chance to see it yourself in person. Also in the UK this month is a final update on the defamation case of Richard Taylor versus the writers and producers, including Steve Coogan, of the film The Lost King, which is a retelling of the search and discovery of the remains of King Richard III, spearheaded by Philippa Langley. I actually watched and reviewed this film when it first came out, if you want to hear my extended thoughts on it, but essentially my impression was that in the interest of keeping to a hero-villain storyline, the film's creators, through the archaeologists and university people who assisted and worked with Philippa, film kind of throws them under the bus to make them the villain. People get really mad about this in the comments. I'm not saying that she didn't contribute. She hugely contributed to this and nothing would have happened without her, but also this also wouldn't have been found with the contributions of the archaeologists who were involved and the people at the university and their support. Especially maligned was Richard Taylor, the deputy registrar at the University of Leicester, who sued the filmmakers over his portrayal as dismissive, patronizing, and misogynistic. He is now settled with the filmmakers who, in addition to paying his damages and lawyers' fees, will add an on-screen clarification at the beginning of the film to make it clear that the character's actions and portrayal in the film do not actually represent who he was and what he did in real life. Interestingly, Philippa was not able to actually testify in the case in the defense of the film due to health complications as she suffers from chronic fatigue. And she has since moved on to her next project, looking for the grave of King Henry I of England under, you guessed it, a car park in Reading. Last but not least this month is the news that the Grand Egyptian Museum, or GEM for short, has finally opened. Described as the world's largest archaeological museum, it is packed with over 100,000 artifacts covering some 7,000 years of the country's history, including the entire contents of Tutankhamun's tomb, displayed together for the first time since it was found. You can watch the full opening ceremony on YouTube, and I'm actually tempted to live stream watching and reacting to it. Let me know if that's something you'd like to join me for. And I can't wait till my daughter is a little bit older, and you can bet that I will be dragging both her and my husband to Cairo to go to the museum and enjoy it for a few days, hopefully after, you know, the big surge of people wanting to go see it is over. All right, everyone, time to pack up our finds and hang up our shovels. That's everything for this video. Did you like it? Which discovery was your favorite? Is there anything important that I missed? Don't forget to comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel before you leave to help support me. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or go to my Ko-fi page and support me with a small donation. If you're looking for a more tangible return, you can go have a look at my Redbubble shop and get a sticker, t-shirt, hat, or mug with your favorite archaeology slogan on it. Taking a few seconds to support me in any way that you can, large or small, really helps me out in growing the channel and also has a knock-on effect of promoting quality heritage content that is well-sourced, researched, and presented by somebody who is actually an expert in this subject and knows what they're talking about. It shows the algorithm that people are interested in learning about real archaeology, not just sensationalism. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure inside archaeology.